Hello and welcome to a discussion on one of the most important subjects and one of the most important topics, philosophy. Philosophy is derived from a compound Greek word, philos and sophia. Philos means love and sophia means wisdom. Therefore, in a nutshell, philosophy is the love of wisdom. Philosophy entails definitions, interpretation, analysis, and critical reflections. It's about discussing fundamental questions about human existence and the world around us. Philosophy is divided into 5 distinct fields of 5 distinct branches. The first one is called epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, its limitation, and the value of knowledge. There are 2 kinds of knowledge. A priori knowledge is knowledge without experience. And this is the knowledge, like mathematical knowledge, 1 plus 1 is equals to 2, is knowledge that cannot be derived from experience. It's called a priori knowledge. A posteriori knowledge is the knowledge after experience. It involves scientific experimentation and the experience by the senses, the 5 common senses of touch, feel, smell, and those senses. That is called a priori knowledge. Therefore, epistemology is the study of knowledge and its limitations and the extent of knowledge and what can we really know. Metaphysics is derived from 2 Greek words, meta and physics. Meta is beyond and physics is the physical, beyond the physical. In metaphysics, we deal with questions like the existence of God, issues that are beyond the physical. And in fact, Aristotle said that metaphysics is the basis of philosophy. Then we have logic. Logic is the study of correct reasoning. And in the correct reasoning is where the premises support the conclusions. And where the premises do not support the conclusion, we have fallacies. We have formal and informal fallacies. Informal fallacies entails where the conclusion does not follow the premises. And informal fallacies deals with incorrect arguments. They are distinct fallacies. The fallacies of appeal to emotions. The attack on a person and not the subject under discussion is another fallacy. There are many fallacies. The straw man's fallacy, where you attack the argument. You attack the weak side of the argument without presenting the correct argument of the opponent. It's called a straw man's argument. Then the argument of appealing to false authority. That's also a fallacy. And it is dealt with in logic. There is ethics. Ethics is the study of rules of behavior, the right and the wrongs. That is ethics, a branch of philosophy. There is deontological ethics. When you deal with duty, you do things because it is duty. And teleological ethics, where you do things because of the end product of the same. So this is ethics. Then lastly, we have aesthetics. Aesthetics is the study of beauty. It's called beauty, the expression of beauty, and even art can all be summed up under aesthetics. These are the main branches of philosophy. There are different approaches to philosophy, methodology of doing philosophy. Some of the methodology include skepticism. In skepticism, you doubt everything. This methodology was used by people like David Hume. David Hume was a skeptic. And the other approach is dogmatics, where you believe something to be axiomatic and truthful, that even you do not need to substantiate. You do not need to substantiate what you believe is true. You begin with it. Most of our theology approach issues dogmatically. So we must understand that there are different branches, there are different methodology of doing philosophy. The other thing that we must know is that any study, be it psychology, philosophy, be it psychology, be it medicine, be it theology, all of them are philosophy. Philosophy is the study of any subject matter under the universe. No wonder up to today, as you go and get a PhD, whether it is in chemistry, whether it is in biology, it is PhD, it is Doctor of Philosophy. Therefore, any subject matter under the planet Earth is a legitimate subject of inquiry under philosophy. And I want to tell you, philosophy is very critical in studying for a theological student. Why is it critical? Is that it gives us the basis to explain the existence of God. Just as you remember this man called Thomas Aquinas, the dumb ox. Thomas Aquinas had 5 proofs of the existence of God that are mainly Aristotelian. The unmoved mover argument, that despite every move, there is a mover that is unmoved, and that is God, the uncaused cause. The teleological argument, when you look at design, it makes you to say that there is a great designer, and that is God. And then there is the ethical argument. In the ethical argument, we have morality and a conscience that points us to God. Then lastly, we have the ontological argument that God is that which nothing greater can be conceived. Anselm and even Aristotle propagated this argument. So philosophy might be critical in explaining the existence of God and proving the existence of God. But Trinity can only be based on Scripture. Also, philosophy is critical, philosophy is important in the sense that it can be used to defend the Christian faith logically. And how does it defend it logically? We have most of the apologists, the defenders of the Christian faith, approached it with philosophical rhetoric and defense of an argument. The other thing why we believe that philosophy is very critical. Philosophy is systematic. There is logic and organization, which can be an invaluable tool to a systematic theologian. Whereas philosophy can be a good hand servant or maid servant of theology, it cannot be the master of theology, because we can get into many errors like people like Origen went into when we follow philosophy as the lead rather than systematic theology. I believe that theology should take the lead and philosophy should be subservient to theology. But it's very critical. I want to begin by explaining the pre-Socrates philosophers. The pre-Socrates philosophers were not like the poets and the mystics who explained the existence of God in terms of God. They explained the existence of the universe in terms of gods. But the pre-Socrates philosophers began with a scientific explanation of matter and what exists on earth. I'll begin with Thales. Thales is among the first. It is said that Thales was able to calculate the height of a tree based on its shadow, and even to calculate distance of ships in the ocean by observing at the time they were in particular places. Thales was able to predict the eclipse of the moon. And Thales, according to him, he found water to be the primordial stuff of the universe. Why? Because water can be found in three states: solid, liquid, and gas. Therefore, water is the primordial stuff. Everything is water, according to him. Anaximander. Anaximander is the second one. According to the Anaximander, the earth, everything in the earth is formed out of the boundless mass. The boundless mass that made the specific things. And the specific things cannot make the boundless mass. The boundless mass is the primordial stuff, according to Anaximander. Anaximander had some rudimentary understanding of biology, of the theory of evolution. He said long time ago, creatures used to live in the ocean. Later, they left the ocean and lived on land. The animals that were not able to survive on land perished, and it was the precursor. It was the gem of the teaching of survival for the fittest. Anaximander, then Anaximenes. Anaximenes saw that air is the primordial stuff, because he looked at animals and creatures and discovered that air is everything. Therefore, he explained the origin, the primordial stuff is air. And he believed in what is hard is through rarefaction, and there is condensation and rarefaction. Some things are condensed. When air is pushed, it condenses. Then later there is what we call rarefaction. That is Anaximenes. The fourth one is Heraclitus. According to Heraclitus, this great philosopher, change is real. According to him, you cannot jump into the river twice. Change is real. Nothing is permanent. Everything is changing. Even the mountains that seem not to change is an illusion of the eye. And it is only through reason that you will discover, not sight. It's only through reason that you will discover that everything is changing, not permanent. And according to him, fire best exemplifies change, and it is the primordial stuff. Lastly, we see Parmenides. According to Parmenides, there is nothing like change. Everything is permanent, because we cannot get knowledge for what is ever changing. And according to Parmenides, the unchangeable being, the being that is unchangeable, is the primordial stuff. From there we go to the great era of Greek philosophy, and we look at Socrates. Socrates was one of the great philosophers, and he asked many questions. And there is what we call the Socrates challenge, or the Socrates problem or irony, is that Socrates did not write anything. Therefore, what we read about Socrates, we read from their students. So we cannot decipher if they were things that were said by him or his students put on his mouth. The other thing about the Socrates irony is that whereas Socrates claimed ignorance, he said, the only thing I know is that I don't know anything. And Socrates confronted the people who claimed to know, and at the end of the day, it was discovered that Socrates knew, whereas the rest did not know anything. They were ignorant. Socrates confessed that the only thing I know is that I don't know anything. And it is from Socrates that we learn of the conscience and the method of doing philosophy. He enabled people to discover truth on their own, just like his mother, who was a midwife. He said he helped the people, he midwifed the people to discover truth on their own. That is Socrates, one of the pioneer thinkers and one of the great philosophers that we are indebted to him. His greatest student was Plato. Plato was a nickname, meant a man with broad shoulders, a wrestler, a soldier. And we see Socrates, when Socrates died because of following the conscience, and he drank hemlock when he was accused of teaching foreign gods, rather than running away, Socrates remained because you had to follow the conscience to the bitter end. Plato was a great philosopher, and he was the first one to head an all-embracing system of philosophy. His greatest thoughts is the theory of forms and ideas. According to him, what we see with our own eyes are illusions. They are reflections of the form that is unseen, that is perfect, that is not in our mind, that is beyond our mind. And you know, he had the similitude of the cave. He said that people who are in a cave, arrested and chained to the cave, and as they saw people passing outside, and they saw the shadows, they thought the shadows were real, until one of them escaped and he discovered that these were shadows, but these people did not like. So it was an illustration of Socrates, who discovered the reality beyond this world of the shade, the real world. What we see is an illusion. We are supposed to go to form that is unchangeable, that is perfect, the theory of forms and ideas. Aristotle was the famous pupil or student of Plato. And whereas Plato began the school that is called academy, Aristotle began the school that was called the Lyceum. He used to lecture while walking. He was a polymath. He knew everything except mathematics. But Plato was a master of geometry. But Aristotle did not know mathematics. He was a good botanist and zoologist. He had intense studies. And he disagreed with his tutor because he liked the truth more than the tutor. He said that what is real is not what is out there. What is real is in the thing itself. He is the father of the current scientific thinking. The current scientific thinking is indebted to this man called Aristotle. Aristotle, who was a tutor at a particular time, he was a tutor of Alexander the Great, the man who conquered the entire world, was tutored by this great philosopher. According to him, you should go to the golden mean. You should avoid extremity and live within the golden mean. From that earlier period, the zenith of Greek philosophy, there was deterioration. And allow me to look at modern philosophy. And we are going to look at a person by the name of Rene Descartes. He's the father of rationalistic thinking. He says, I think, therefore I am. His method was to begin with the doubt. You doubt everything and you come and conclude the only thing that you cannot doubt is your own existence. I think, therefore I am. The other philosopher who initiated the field of study in philosophy that is called idealism is Hegel, who was very close to the sister, and some people suspected that they may had incest or things like that, but it is unsubstantiated. Hegel believed in what we call dialecticism. In dialecticism, there was a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. The world rotated in these three things: the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. That's how the world rotated according to this man called Hegel. Hegel wrote very complicated philosophy. In fact, it's called pseudo-philosophy. He's an obscurist. He writes very complex. But he had this concept of geists. and God is the propagator of history. And history to him was very critical and very important. Hegel was the precursor of Marxism, and it is Karl Marx who brought this concept of Marxism. The brainchild was Hegel. Then lastly, we see after the Third World War, there was the concept of man's absurdity, the life being absurd, and death bringing absurdity in life. And it brought something that is called existentialism. Jean-Paul Sartre says that life is an empty bubble out of the sea of nothing. Therefore, existentialist and nihilism is closely related, that there is no purpose of existence and life is absurd. Everything is absurd. It doesn't make sense. And death makes the absurdity become more real and clear to us. Jean-Paul Sartre, and there is the melancholic Dutch, Soren Kierkegaard. They have very, very negative understanding. And you'll find that these are the basis of modern philosophy. Lastly, I'll conclude by talking about African philosophy. Whereas European philosophy or the Western philosophy is written in books, even Hegel doubted if it's possible to have African philosophy because Africans do not have anything that is written, and also Africans, our philosophy is more pragmatic, it's practical, it's man-centered. It's based on the myth, the stories, the legends, and the riddles. That is African philosophy. It is the collective wisdom of the people. And there are 4 trends of African philosophy. Number 1 is ethno-philosophy. It's based on the collective knowledge of a community. That's ethno-philosophy. It focuses on the God and the spirit and the spiritual world. By the way, Africans, there were 3 realities. 1, there was God. Then the spirits. Then there was the servants of the spirit, or the practitioners of the spirit, the witch doctors. Then lastly, there was the common people. That is the reality of our ethno-philosophy. The second thing is the second trend is the theological sagacity. Odera Oruka, one of the famous philosophers, explained about philosophical sagacity. A sage was someone who was considered courageous, and he could think on the behalf of the community. Whereas ethno-philosophy is based on the community collective knowledge. The philosophical sagacity is based on the wisdom of an individual that the community endorsed. He was a spokesman of the community. Number 3, there is nationalistic philosophy. These were philosophies propagated by African fathers. And African fathers, among them people like Kenneth Kaunda, Mwalimu Julius Kabarage Nyerere, they propagated nationalistic philosophy. In Kenya, there was Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. They propagated African philosophy. It's based on African wisdom, folk wisdom, our riddles, our stories, our songs, our worldview, the way we perceive reality. That is the basis of our philosophy. They wanted to have a philosophy that embraces and galvanizes the African people, and they are called nationalistic philosophy. Lastly, we have professional philosophy, where it's written and discussed like Western philosophy. Some of the philosophies in Africa, among them is Humanism by Kenneth Kaunda, KK, the man with a Kaunda suit. And KK advocated for a philosophy of humanism where man is involved, everybody is involved, hard work, everyone is valued, and everyone contributes. No one is supposed to be idle. These were philosophies that were supposed to help the African rebuild their nation. There was democracy. But the challenge in most of these things, it was in the ideal, but the reality was somehow different from the ideal. There was Leopold Sedar Senghor. According to him, he had a philosophy of negritude. Everything that was black was disparaged. It was considered evil and bad. Anything black, be it black sheep, black day, black cat, it was all considered bad. That is, but negritude wanted us to appreciate the blackness and celebrate the blackness. We must have a journey of being conscious of being black and appreciate the fact that black is good, black is beauty, black is good, and black is beautiful. There was Mwalimu Kabarage Nyerere, who introduced Ujamaa philosophy. It's brought from brotherhood, not only brotherhood, but also familyhood. He wanted to remove the unequal distribution of wealth and exploitation. And he brought Ujamaa and collectivization. And people lived in villages, vijiji, and they worked together. And Ujamaa, whereas in a good sense, Ujamaa enabled Tanzania to be one nation. But economically, it was a disaster. In 1976, it was retorted that Kenyatta said that Tanzania is a man-eat-nothing society. Whereas Mwalimu said Kenya is a man-eat-man society. The reality is still there. Is it good to have poverty but you are united? Or is it good to have wealth and greed and avarice that is still part and parcel of the Kenyan society up to today? I think sometimes we must have an element of